Let's talk hydrogen, the H2 Hub Hydroverse podcast. We talk to experts from the world of hydrogen and molecules. The big international innovation event will then take place on June 26th at this year's Hydroverse convention in Essen, Germany. Find all the details at hydroverse-convention.com.
Today's guest is Gökçe Mete, Senior Partnership Manager at Vattenfall and co-founder of Women in Green Hydrogen. My name is Marina Scheider, PR and Communications Manager at H2 Hub. And together with Gökçe, I will talk about gender in the hydrogen industry, what's changing, and what the recent backlash in the US reveals about the state of the sector. We'll also touch on how to create space for more diversity in the energy industry. Gökçe, great to have you. Let's start with your journey. How did you end up working at the intersection of hydrogen and gender equity?
Hey, Marina. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on the podcast. I guess you don't really choose to be at the intersection. It sort of happens to you if you are working in the energy sector today. We can talk about the numbers later, but we are already starting with a minority position. So it certainly makes you think. But I would say it has been more visible for me as I started my journey in more like conventional fuels, where I sort of also my PhD was looking at natural gas. During the years I practiced as a lawyer, I work with like petroleum licensing, mining, and again natural gas project development related cases. So then it's even more prominent in the fossil-based industries that women are far and few in numbers, especially in more managerial and senior roles. It's really true for every part of the ecosystem. I worked in research, law firms, international organizations. I have a diverse background. I worked in a consultancy and, of course, now in a wind developer, renewable energy developer, so now in the private sector. But I've also seen that it holds true in most places, except for Vattenfall. But we can talk about that later also during the show. But what I found really exciting has been the opportunity that came with hydrogen. So when I moved from natural gas towards more hydrogen as my main quest, even at analyzing and looking at natural gas in the EU, has been, why do we really need natural gas? How can we get out of it? Is this something important? Is it something that creates dependability? And it's not a great fuel to ensure our energy security. And many research outcomes or conversations I had would show that, we have to use fossil fuels for heavy industries, for manufacturing, to keep the economy going. But we sort of see that is not always true. We can decarbonize with hydrogen that provides high heat for the many sectors that was previously labeled hard to abate. So that kind of brought me to hydrogen, and I went deeper into that by taking the role as head of Leadership Group for Industry Transition Secretariat in Sweden. I worked in looking at steel, cement, and many sectors like chemicals and the role hydrogen can play in there. Later on, as a consultant, I also looked at fertilizer and ammonia, and still do that at Vattenfall in the context of hydrogen. And so when I did that sort of transition myself, I started speaking at conferences because I wrote and published about hydrogen in early days, like 2018. I also wrote a book about future of gas in the EU, so that I got invited to speak at conferences as I did before on natural gas, and I seen that it initially looked the same. So we were really like a few women in the room, in the panels, in the discussion, in the discourse. So that sort of prompted me to to desire a change. And I was lucky to have other women who felt the same. And that's how we founded Women in Green Hydrogen back then in 2019, and took some time to set it up. But it's a little bit that we just didn't want the same history repeating itself. And with hydrogen, we saw that it's an opportunity to make women more visible, as there's no shortage of expertise. But I'll leave some of that for questions later, perhaps about women in green hydrogen.
What would you say? What has changed since you found the organization?
Certainly a lot. We have, I would say, it started as a community. The idea came, and then COVID hit, so many of us were stuck in our homes, and we really started networking. And I remember, like, Zoom broke because there were so many women across the globe interested. And from being sort of a community and network, we did start, of course, with a database. So that is important to mention, and it's been really important for us to have that database, so we don't have organizations telling us, be that conferences, be that recruiters telling us, well, there's no woman, we couldn't find them. So the database has sector by sector, seniority, experience, women listed at the Women in Green Hydrogen website. So that we have built, and it's still, I think, one of the most useful products of the network. I say network, but we have become an NGO. So we had to become more organized because of how much demand there is for women in green hydrogen services. That includes like mentoring. We do trainings. We do partnerships with event organizers. There are many instruments that came out of it, very bottom up. But we have become an NGO, and that means that we are now a lot more structured. Now we have country chapters. The global reach is incredible. There's India, Latin America, US, Europe, in Europe even more granularized like country chapters. I am heading like the Dutch chapter with Afkenel, a colleague from Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. So what has changed, of course, we have a community in every country, in every region almost now. We have had industry partnerships with over 50 event organizers. So we have requirements that they have to meet. There are women quotas that we ask for female panel participation. And then, of course, we have done lots of, I think, mentored over 500 women. So that has made a difference. We have been more visible. We have made women in hydrogen more visible. And I think, also, I think it has changed the way companies work. And we get that feedback from them as well when they look at hiring, setting up teams. So, I would say it's been an impactful journey, and there's a lot more to do.
Yeah, sure there is. I would like to talk about the current shift that is taking place. In our preliminary talk, you've spoken about the growing backlash against gender equity efforts. Could you tell us what form is that backlash taking?
Of course, I wouldn't say I see it in European level. I don't see a backlash, at least sort of in my day-to-day work and environment. I'm very lucky to work for Vattenfall. We have our own Women in Energy network. In every sort of energy sector related event where we have a booth where we are present significantly, we then make sure that we also have a Women in Energy networking event. We bring women together. So, and I have like a company that where my immediate boss is male, but then his boss and his boss and his boss and her boss there, all the way to the CEO, are actually female. So we have very good balance. So I don't see it, let's say, day to day in my environment. But of course, the sector has a lot to do, and it's not the case in every company. In Europe, I don't see a backlash immediately, but of course the discourse has changed with the US, the changes in the US. We know that in every international forum that US representatives are speaking and representing their position, they would like inclusivity to be removed. So there's a great danger that this could have an impact on what goes into the direction of sort of international standing on gender, because there's just a lot to fight for. So there's gender backlash. There's of course a lot of backlash on green transition itself, aid, defense. So there's danger that maybe this is not the first fight to pick up in such a volatile situation. So I think efforts must be kept to keep inclusivity on the agenda, on the global agenda, and maybe take it as an opportunity to strengthen it, to make sure that that what's happening in the US also doesn't impact the US. And of course, the US is very diverse, and there are a lot of course, national, like there's room for federal states to influence in their local area the decisions they take. I'm not a US specialist. I'm guessing, as it happened with climate, some states will continue and maybe even foster more clean energy, as it happened before, ambition. We hope that happens also for inclusivity. But I think the risk is that it may have trickle effect on the global discourse, and that may be an opportunity. But I also see that there's a lot of other topics on the table.
Why do you think this is happening right now? I mean, yes, the US is setting a different tone in terms of inclusion. But initiatives like yours, Women in Green Hydrogen, are about women gaining more visibility. Why do you think this backlash is so strong right now, just as we are talking about inclusion and diversity?
Look, I'm not a political scientist. I'm not a US expert. I would say, it's just something I was listening to. Maybe there's fear. US has been quite, this is a group of people who are coming from, white male background, who have had like white male people around them the whole time. So the power has been so concentrated. So it might be about not willing to give the power to someone a group of people who doesn't look like them. So it might be a fear of sharing power or giving away power, but it doesn't have to be this way. At the end of the day, like there's countless scientific studies and evidence that diversity brings benefits, economic gains, efficiency gains, for sure, a lot of community benefits as well. So it is. I'm guessing it comes from fear. That's my only guess. But again, I'm not an expert.
Let's talk about what we can do. So what would you say is needed to truly shift the balance for more inclusion and diversity beyond panels and promises?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I think a lot about. And we also talked about it in our sort of pre-discussion, because I've just finished now a little bit outdated book, Lean In. And I guess the author there in that book was aiming at like there should be more women in leadership positions and power and decision making posts to make a real impact in how policies are designed. But to get there are sacrifices to be made, and that's sort of where the dynamic was in the book. I didn't agree with the sacrifices that meant like a woman going back to work to stay in a like C-level position after being a mother like a couple of weeks after. So for me, it hurts to think that women have to do that. As I just became a mother, and I have a 10-year-old son now, and I was lucky enough to have an 8 months leave, but it still felt short. And I have an equal partner, and he could take 4 months, still fell short. as we moved to the Netherlands from Sweden, and I know in Sweden it's like 18 months. So one thing the book is talking about, even if you don't have a child as a woman, you think that you might, then you maybe not take that senior position. You think like it might stop you. In a way to create more equality. And not everyone wants to have a child, of course, and it's not always the reason why we don't have more women in the sector, but it's a very important part of it that we really need to have policies in place to support women when a family is formed, because even in most advanced, let's say, societies in terms of gender and inclusivity policy, like Sweden and the Nordics, still women do more. There are better and worse places. So I think we need to have that sorted. It has a huge impact on how women are sort of left out of the corporate ladder. As the problem is that they are hired, but then women are not taking. Then you see them less as the ladder goes up, and a lot of it is to do with how little we share the duty of family. Even in Germany, men can take that parental leave, but I know that very few actually do. So we should have really shared parental leave. I think that would make a big difference. And education, of course, it is changing. I think younger generation are thinking differently. But we need to, it's also, again, no secret that women we don't encourage them to go to more technical fields. And not much has changed over the past, 5 years, 10 years on that. I was advising a French group of universities that on technical studies, they've sort of revisited how the whole education system is, and they are bringing in sort of, they're trying to build a new generation of engineers or educate new generation of engineers who can think, like, who have social science skills and then also science to sort of mix that in the educational program. But there's no active thinking around how we can get women to be attracted to those fields. At the end of the day, energy sector is quite technical, so I think that's also very important.
Gökçe, before we move on in our discussion, could you give us the title or the author of the book you mentioned? Because I think many listeners would like to have a look at it.
I have like mixed feelings about it. So it's Sheryl Sandberg. She is a former COO of Meta. There were a lot of good in the book. It made me think, but there were a lot of things I said, I did not like it.
Fair enough.
In a way, I think the best option is, of course, for a woman to have the option to decide if they want to go back to work after 3 months. They should be allowed to do that, and men should be like encouraged and not frowned upon to take that, remaining of that leave. Not everyone wants to do that, and also. There was another study that looked at the Nordics, and when given the opportunity, women actually don't want to take always the more sort of C-level, stress-driven, travel-driven roles, and that should be also completely okay. We should just have the option, and that's where we want to get to, I think.
So, I mean, with all the challenges still ahead of us, what would you say? What gives you hope right now?
I think the book talks about this too. There's a generational shift. I remember that as well when I was, in my 20s, when I sort of, I felt that woman some 15 years ago. Let's not reveal my age, but some years ago, let's say more than a decade and a half, I could see that this woman supporting woman motto was just emerging. I think in the past, women had to be like men to be in leadership positions. They had to dress suits sometimes, and they had to work like crazy hours. maybe have some attitudes that are more, less compassionate, or less cooperative against other women. Maybe they felt like more, competition from other females. That is correct a few generations ago, but or I remember that from like older women that I encountered at the time. What I'm seeing now is really, really through cooperation, women supporting women, networks emerging, a lot of informal, support. A lot of women are hiring women, or like not necessarily women, but women are hiring more diverse workforce. So I see that really something that has changed, and I think that is something really to be celebrated, and it gives me a lot of hope that by doing so we can get to a point where we don't talk about these issues, hopefully, anymore. And that goes, of course, not just for gender, but inclusivity overall.
Yeah, definitely. And what would you say, what's one thing that every listener here can do to support a more diverse or inclusive energy future?
Yeah, I think, so I think we need to be really active and mindful in not every culture has the attitude to speak up, to sit there. Something also the book talks about now that I think that I'm influenced by it, even though I have complaints about some things. But yes, to encourage others to sit at the table. So I think everyone should be more aware every day to see if a woman is sitting at the corner of a room full of men, we should like encourage them to come sit at the table. If we look at our teams, and it's not just like, okay, companies have 50% leadership, but then you look at individual teams, and it might be an engineering team that's like 10 men or 10 white men in suits. We should really not just look at like numbers at a company higher level, but really think individualistically how we want to set up, not individualistic, but like more granular, how each team looks like, what can we do to bring in diversity, and also within teams that we have like a lot of minority people, then we should encourage them to, if we see that they are not sitting at the table, we should every day encourage them to sit at the table, and little by little, I think that makes a difference. A lot of work is, of course, falls upon like families to raise our children differently than our parents did, in a way. At home, we have a lot to do. And of course, fathers setting examples for children, like having equal partners and seeing that. Yeah, it's like a lot. One can do a lot at home every day. In every meeting, you can do a lot. And if you're a person of influence, and if you're setting up teams, you can also do that every day at work.
Sure enough, we can do that. Gökçe, we are already at the end, unfortunately, of our podcast. It was a real pleasure talking to you, and thank you for giving us an honest look at gender in the hydrogen economy.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Gökçe. If you like this episode, you follow us. Check out more voices that are driving the transformation. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
That was Let's Talk Hydrogen, the H2 Hub Hydroverse podcast. Get your ticket for the Hydroverse convention and meet the leading experts from the world of hydrogen. All details at hydroverse-convention.com.